The intersection of endurance sport, health, fitness, and life. Challenging conventional ideas and empowering people with the science of self-propelled motion. This is the Endurance Experience Podcast, hosted by Tony Rich.
Welcome back to the Endurance Experience Podcast. We are rapidly approaching the end of the year, and that means people will start thinking about New Year's resolutions, which means every social media influencer, self-proclaimed health coach or guru is going to be marketing everything under the sun as a health and wellness or fitness solution for people. Not to mention, athletes will be looking to shore up their new race goals and figuring out their plans and ready to spend money on just about anything that will promise lofty gains in performance or recovery. But does any of it work? And that is the title of this podcast, number 47. The Pseudoscience of Sport, Health, and Fitness. Well, I have the perfect person to have a conversation with about this topic. He is Professor Nick B. Tiller. He's a Ph.D., a senior researcher in exercise physiology at Harbor-UCLA, and author of The Skeptic's Guide to Sport Science, which was named one of Book Authority's best science books of all time. He's a columnist at Skeptical Inquirer magazine, a columnist at Ultra Running magazine, and associate editor at the International Journal of Sports Nutrition and Exercise Metabolism. For over a decade, he's been scrutinizing the commercial health and wellness industry through the critical lens of scientific skepticism. Professor Tiller is also quite the endurance enthusiast himself. He ran his first marathon at age 18. He's competed at the Ironman distance in 2010. He ran his first ultramarathon. Since then, he's contested some of the world's toughest endurance races, including the Marathon Des Sables and several 100-mile trail races. So on the podcast, we basically discuss many of the topics that are in Professor Tiller's book, The Skeptic's Guide to Sports Science, Confronting Myths of the Health and Fitness Industry. I highly recommend it. The link is in the show notes. Please go pick that up. And so we get into a conversation about the placebo effect, and Professor Tiller breaks it down for the listener. We discuss the common placebo effect is still in effect, so what's the big deal? A response. And so Professor Tiller gives his response to that and talks about the potential downsides to placebo effect, particularly with unproven methods. We have a conversation about acupuncture, cupping, and dry needling, and why we've seen motivation of such alternative medicines, particularly among athletes, and whether or not there is any demonstrated efficacy of such methods beyond placebo. We talk about nutrition, and in particular fad diets and supplements that are driven by heuristics and biases that have led populations to seek quick fixes for weight loss under an increasing obesity epidemic. We discuss the efficacy of a myriad of athlete recovery protocols, including cold immersion, cryotherapy, massage and robot massage, compression garments, and whether or not there is anything that has been scientifically demonstrated to meaningfully expedite performance or recovery. Finally, we talk about logical fallacies that are typically made by people, and Professor Tiller discusses his response to such fallacies. So without further delay, I give you Professor Nick Tiller. I am on with Dr. Nick Tiller. Thanks for coming on to the Endurance Experience podcast.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. I have in my hand the Skeptic's Guide to Sports Science, Confronting Myths of the Health and Fitness Industry by Dr. Nicholas Tiller. So I found the book that I am going to give out for this holiday season to quite a few people. It's a great book. And so I want to start by just getting your origin story a little bit, your background, your motivation for writing this book. I understand you're a bit of an endurance enthusiast yourself, if you talk about that. But yeah, let's hear from you in your own words.
Sure. Well, I come from a kinesiology background. In the UK, it's sport and exercise science. In the US, it's kinesiology. The curriculum is very similar. And so I did my undergraduate degree. So I majored in sports science, stayed at the same university to do my master's in exercise physiology. This is going back 2005 to 2007. And this was all done at a place called the University of Hertfordshire, which is just outside North London in the United Kingdom. Your listeners will tell immediately that I have a stiff British accent, slightly Americanized these days. And I knew very early on that I wanted to work in high performance sport. That was really my goal. That was my ambition. And actually, I've done polls with my undergraduates when I was teaching in my previous position, how many of them want to work in high performance sport? And about 95% of them put their hands up. And the reality is probably 1% of them will actually get to accomplish that dream. I was one of the lucky few. I volunteered my time, gave up a lot of my weekends to accumulate the experience, and I was fortunate to get a job at the English Institute of Sport shortly following my master's. This is 2008 to 2010. And the EIS is the service provider of choice to the Olympic performance programs in the UK. So I got to work with the UK Athletics Endurance Program, the Flatwater Kayak Squad, rowing, and so forth. And after being there for a couple of years, I realized that I had fallen in love with the science more than the sport. I loved the sport, and exercise was always going to be a part of my future. But I really wanted to focus on being a good scientist. So I went to do my Ph.D. at Brunel University in West London. That had a focus on respiratory physiology, respiratory medicine. And then I had a series of different roles after that. Was an assistant, then associate professor. And then I came to the US to take on a research position at Harbor-UCLA. And we're an exercise physiology lab here. Mm-hmm. In terms of my motivation for the book, at the time when I was starting to work in high performance sport, it was about the same time that I found this movement called scientific skepticism, right? Which really is a way of looking at the world as a critical thinker. You learn how to think more than what to think. Learning the facts and figures is important. Certainly, if you want to be a good scientist, you have to know the ins and outs, and you have to know the anatomy and the way that the body works from a physiological perspective. Or if you're an S&C coach, you have to know the different lifts and so forth. But being a good critical thinker is more a process. Being a good scientist is about following a good process. So it's about following this idea of learning how to think rather than what to think. And I realized that actually this ethos of prioritizing the process and being humble and showing humility and being honest, this idea of honest inquiry, prioritizing the process above the conclusions, stripping away bias. Right. All of these things are in stark contrast to what we see in the health and wellness space, or the health and fitness industry, where marketing really is prioritized. So in writing the book, I wanted to bring those two worlds closer together and help people to navigate this commercial world without being cheated and deceived, because you're more likely to invest in strategies that actually work, that actually improve your performance, that actually improve your health, that reduce your pain, and so forth. So that's sort of how the book came about anyway.
Yeah. And it's a great book. And you mentioned that in the beginning about scientific skepticism, coined by Carl Sagan, a great astronomer who was a scientist that also influenced me, sent me into many different directions. Pale Blue Dot, The Demon Haunted World, and many of those books. But yeah, it's not a doctrine or set of rules. It isn't concerned with instructions on what to think, but rather how to think. And that says it all, right? And so asking a scientist what side you're on is like asking an umpire, do you call balls or do you call strikes? Right?
Right. A good scientist will respond that way. You're absolutely right. The whole idea of being a good scientist is being an honest person, is to be objective, to be as objective as you can. The reality is that we're all influenced by bias. We all have biases. It's impossible to eliminate them. But being a good thinker, being a clear thinker, is about understanding your biases and stripping them away as much as possible. So we mitigate them rather than eliminate them. Yeah. There is still bias in science, and you don't have to look very far to find scientists who are not very good at looking objectively. There's a confirmation bias with the work they do. But in principle, yes, absolutely right.
Confirmation bias, publication bias, and of course, scientists do get wedded to their pet theories and such. You're right. And the scientific method is what is the thing that was devised as the greatest thing that humanity has ever seen. I mean, we just sent a refrigerator to intercept an asteroid in space. And so we know science works, right? But you're right. Yeah, absolutely. Biases can creep in from time to time. There's so many things in the book when I went through the book, and that's why I said I'm gonna use it as my stocking stuffer for the holiday season for a great many people. But let's start by talking about the placebo effect, because a lot of the things that's in your book stem from this concept of placebo effect. So in working with athletes, sort of being a science and evidence-based coaching athletes, so many times we see athletes get involved in what they perceive to be quick silver bullet fixes, which you talk about in the book. Can you explain what the placebo effect is to the listener and how science tries to control for it in experiments?
So there's a whole chapter in the book about placebo. I think it's the power of placebo, because it's really a fundamental concept in the health and wellness space and in sports performance as well. And for the listeners who are not familiar, the placebo effect is an effect that is based on expectation and belief. So if you try some kind of intervention, whether it's a supplement or a new pair of sneakers or a particular running garment, whatever it happens to be, and you're anticipating that it's going to improve your performance or make you feel better or stronger or reduce your pain, then it's likely to have some kind of effect because of that pre-existing belief. Again, it comes back to bias.
Right.
But when there's a placebo effect, the intervention isn't actually having a direct physical or physiological effect on the body. It's sort of what we can ascribe to a psychosomatic effect. And placebo is very powerful. It's been studied extensively in the scientific literature for many decades, and it exerts very powerful psychobiological effects. So, for example, the very early operations or surgeries that occurred in the clinical setting, this is before the invention of or the discovery of anesthetics. The placebo effect was one of the only tools that physicians had to help patients get through these very invasive and sometimes very painful procedures. So they would give the patient some kind of pill or a tablet or a drink, tell them that it was going to relieve their pain and that it was going to stop them from being so uncomfortable. And the fact that they were expecting that to work, that was, one of the only tools that they had.
Right.
It's been studied in the context of pain relief. So, for example, a very nice study gave a group of individuals who were experiencing chronic pain 2 types of painkillers. One of them was packaged in this sort of very cheap, economical, sort of flimsy packaging. It looked very cheap. And the other painkiller was packaged in this very upmarket, very sophisticated looking packaging, and it looked much more expensive. In actuality, it was the exact same painkiller, just packaged in 2 different cases. And overwhelmingly, the patients reported greater analgesic effects, greater pain relieving effects with the one that looked more expensive, even though it was fundamentally the same drug. And in sports performance, this has been looked at a number of times. In different studies, we know that a large proportion of the effect of altitude training is because athletes are anticipating that they will get fitter and more sort of aerobically trained. A really nice study that was published by Brian Saunders and his group not too long ago. It was actually a systematic review, found that something like 60% of the ergogenic or the performance enhancing effect of caffeine is down to expectation. We know that caffeine is a stimulant that actually works. Right. It does actually improve performance via a number of different mechanisms, but a large proportion of the effect is anticipation and belief. People are expecting it to work. And if you give people a decaffeinated beverage and you tell them that it's a very strong caffeine drink, they'll still perform better. They'll still experience some kind of increase in performance. And one study I looked at recently that was published in 2015, but I've only recently come across it. They gave endurance runners an injection of saline. So that's just sodium chloride. Right. But they told the athletes that it was some kind of potent performance enhancing substance, some new cutting edge technology. And they improved performance in a 3K race by about 1.5%, which is not negligible in a short distance race like that. Right. So placebo works. It has very powerful effects on the body. And this is justified in the sporting context because, well, even if it's not having a direct physical effect, if the athlete believes that they're stronger, faster, experiencing less pain, then that's a worthwhile gain. And we're working in the industry, of course, of marginal gains. Every 1% counts. So placebo really can have profound effects on performance.
And then how do you counter? So for some of the methods that may either be just highly speculative, erroneous. The one example is the ion band, the band that they used to wear around their wrist, or something that just may be very expensive. What's the downside, right? So I have gotten that a lot as well. I mean, people saying, "Listen, Tony, what's the big deal? If it has an effect, what's the big deal?" Do you ever counter that retort about what's the big deal?
Yeah, so we have to, and it's probably the question I get asked more than any other is what's the harm? And there is this assumption that, okay, well, if it works and it improves performance or reduces pain, even if it's just imagined, psychosomatic effects, then that's a good thing. And if it doesn't work, then you've lost nothing, right? In theory. But when you ask this question, what's the harm, that there can be explicit harm. So firstly, some placebo products, so these are interventions that work only in the context of placebo, some of them do come with risks, real risks. So alternative medicines, complementary alternative medicines, alternative therapies, these kinds of things, acupuncture, cupping, chiropractic, all of these types of interventions, they work only in the context of placebo. That's not out for discussion really, because the literature is overwhelming on that. These things don't have real physical effects on the body. If there is an effect, it's just an imagined effect. But these things are associated with risks. So there are hundreds of thousands of cases of injury and even death that have followed chiropractic adjustments, cupping-related burns, pneumothorax, so that's punctured lung following acupuncture that was poorly administered, even by professionals, people who've been practicing for years. And of course, all medical interventions are associated with risks, but the benefits here hinge on placebo. So the risks are really difficult to justify, in my opinion. So there's that side of things. The other issue is even if the athlete or the individual is not using something that can necessarily cause harm, let's say they're taking some benign supplement, L-carnitine, right? So it's not known to have any negative effects on the body. It's not known to have toxic effects. But you could take any supplement. Let's say that there's no risk of harm. Well, you have to think about this idea that it's impossible to restrict placebo products to just sports performance and minor medical ailments. If somebody really believes in the power of placebo, it's only going to be a matter of time before they try and use that intervention to potentially treat something serious.
Right.
Yeah. So, for example, cupping therapy, I come back to this a lot because it was popularized largely by Michael Phelps, most successful Olympian in history. Not just the most successful swimmer, most successful athlete in history, won the most gold medals. And he, on his Instagram account, posted pictures of him getting this ancient Chinese therapy cupping. It's indistinguishable from placebo, but there are risks to cupping. People can get burned, can get infection, sepsis, this kind of thing. And while most people use cupping to treat sore muscles, the British Cupping Association tout cupping as a way of treating asthma symptoms.
Right.
So we're treading on very thin ice here. So there are potential it's a slippery slope. There are downstream implications that if we condone the use of placebos in sport, there's no way to stop it from bleeding out of sport into medicine or clinical practice. So that's the potential harm.
Yeah. And I agree 100%. The ethical part of this, a doctor would need to, or whoever administers it oftentimes knows the evidence, but they don't tell them that, okay, this doesn't show any empirical evidence, any efficacy beyond a coin toss, say.
Yeah.
And then costs, the cost of it, there's another ethical part of it, right? It's they can be costly. But you accurately pointed out that for things that actually have been demonstrated to have an ergogenic effect, caffeine, beta alanine or something like that, that's a reputable placebo effect. You have the actual observed empirical effect from the evidence that has an effect, but then that also has a placebo effect on top of it. So why not get the two for one for what works?
Yeah, if you're going to spend the time and money on an intervention, why not spend the time and money and resources on something that will work in a physical capacity and maybe also has a psychological effect as well? I'm keen to get your thoughts, as a coach, somebody who's been doing this a long time. What are your observations of placebos in sport? Do coaches administer placebos knowingly? Is it something that they're keen to endorse because they know it's going to have a psychological effect? I'm keen to get your perspective.
I've seen that quite a bit. I don't do it because I really feel, and I've marketed myself as a science and evidence based practitioner. If it doesn't have empirical evidence, I have to be honest with someone and say, the evidence doesn't bear out that it has any efficacy beyond placebo. I'll tell them that straight out. But if you want to use it, if you feel like it makes you feel good, like a massage, go ahead. But I have to be honest with you and tell you that the evidence is not there. But I do know of many coaches, and I've seen many. If all you got to do is scroll through your social media, and you'll see people touting a lot of this, placebo effect treatment as if they know for certainty that it works. So I've seen quite a bit of it.
I suppose you get one of two camps. You either get individuals, practitioners, coaches who are administering placebos, believing them to work, so they are deluded themselves,
right?
And they haven't looked at the evidence or whatever. Or, as you just said, they're administering this placebo knowing full well that it's not going to have a real physical effect, but it might help the athlete feel better. Actually, it's been studied a little bit, that mostly in the US, and I think something like 60% of coaches have administered placebos, and a large percentage of athletes have gone on record as saying that they wouldn't mind taking a placebo, something that they knew only had a psychological effect, as long as it had the outcome. The outcome is the most important thing in sport. If it improves performance, they don't mind being deceived. They don't mind being lied to, as long as the outcome is the same. So, and that kind of gives you an indication as to what the perceptions are of or what the attitude is towards placebo.
Yeah, and you probably know a lot of people in the endurance community. You tell an endurance enthusiast that something will work or decrease their time by a minute or two, the money will be burning a hole in their pocket to pay for it. It doesn't have to have any evidence. They just need to believe that it's going to, decrease their time by a minute, 2 minutes, or it's going to help them recover faster, or so on and so forth. And when then the Michael Phelps thing happened, when he gets on, the on TV in international Olympic competition with the circle, the broken blood vessels in his back, I said, "Oh my goodness."
Well, and actually, we did an analysis of this and looked at the Wikipedia page hits, the traffic to the Wikipedia entry on cupping therapy. And before Phelps's appearance at the 2016 Games, it was kind of trucking along at maybe 1,500 hits a day. And the day after the Olympic finals, it spiked to well over 100,000. Everybody wanting to know what cupping therapy was all about. And, you'd have seen it yourself. It was featured on the news, in magazines. What are these big purple circles on Phelps's shoulders? And now you see all sorts of swimmers and different athletes trying this thing, despite the fact that it's not evidence-based.
Yeah.
And this, it just goes to show that people, the perception of something working is more important than the evidence. As long as if it's good enough for Phelps, and it's good enough for everyone else. Yeah.
Let's step into that now, since it came up in the talk about placebos. Acupuncture, cupping, these are all what they call complementary alternative medicine.
Yeah.
Now, you can give me your thoughts on where this came from. It's my understanding that these sort of stem from the same idea of chi, or sort of an ancient prana.
Sure.
Help us unpack what it is, and some of what you've talked about, the harmful, potentially harmful parts or unethical parts of it.
Yeah, sure. There are lots of different sort of subcategories of, I guess the umbrella term would be alternative. I guess the umbrella term would be placebo medicine. You have alternative medicine, complementary or alternative therapies. Complementary and alternative medicine, you refer to energy medicine, this idea that there's some kind of energy, the ancient Chinese concept of qi, which is energy flow. And a lot of the complementary and alternative medicines, or CAMs, are based on this idea of energy medicine. So acupuncture, for example, the original incarnations were based on this idea that there are meridians in the body where energy flows. And if you get some kind of ailment or soreness or pain, it's because one of these meridians has been blocked. So you would put needles into the acupuncture site to help the energy to continue to flow. Chiropractic is not an energy medicine. It's not an ancient Chinese medicine. It's actually much more recent than that. It was developed in the sort of mid-1900s, and that is supposedly based on more modern thinking, but it's still it's what we call a pseudoscience, because it takes sort of, it sounds scientific, and it's sort of mimicking scientific principles and the scientific method, but actually it doesn't hold up to scrutiny when it's explored in more detail. And other things like other energy medicines, for example, would be Reiki or healing hands, which is what Mr. Miyagi was very, very good at in The Karate Kid.
Right.
He would put his hands together and rub his hands. That's it. Yeah. And this is all based on sort of ancient Asian medicine. So there are lots of different subcategories, and we wouldn't be able to cover them all.
Yeah.
But very broadly, they can all be considered pseudosciences because they are subverting normal practice. They are impersonating real science, claiming to be evidence-based, but actually any scientist who is worth his or her salt will know very quickly that this stuff is not the real deal.
Right. Yeah. that I see this, I've seen this so much over the years. Acupuncture, dry needling. My response is always, it doesn't have any strong empirical evidence. If you want to do it because you think it feels like a massage and it makes you feel good, maybe there's some second order effect, like it reduces stress hormone, maybe. But I have to be honest and say, this is me speaking to athletes, that it doesn't have strong empirical foundation. And
acupuncture is an interesting one because, as I said, the original incarnations were based on energy medicine and blocked energy meridians. But it was decided a little while ago that these principles are sort of outdated and don't really conform to the modern world, where, you know, we've got access to so much information, and people weren't so much interested in energy medicine. So then they came up with dry needling, which is acupuncture proponents' attempt to basically bring it into the new age, try and make it sound more sciencey, but essentially it's the same practice. It's and again, the evidence for dry needling is very weak. There are hundreds and hundreds of, thousands of studies that have been looking at the effect of acupuncture, and there's a lot of noise in the data, but when you look at the better, more well-controlled study, the effects are non-distinguishable from placebo. And people always come back with the idea that, well, it worked for me.
Well, it worked for me.
I went and tried it and I felt better afterwards.
Yeah.
And this is a fallacy called post hoc ergo propter hoc. It's an informal logical fallacy. It's it's in its base form, in its most basic manifestation. It's you have an ancient tribe, and it's and they go out and they do a rain dance around a fire, and then the next day it rains. And they assume that the dance has caused the rain. Well, maybe it would have rained anyway. So it's the assumption that correlation is the same as causation. And again, it's about understanding bias and how we're likely to commit it.
Right. And I've seen, two ways I've seen them test acupuncture. One way is with they sort of randomize where they put the needles, right? So the so-called expert will say, these are where the meridians are. So say, okay, we'll do a control where we'll just stick them in random places.
Sure.
That's the control, because if the meridians were true, you would get something very different, a different result, if you just randomized and put them in any random place. That's one way they tested, and that didn't really show any difference, right? So that's the control. The other way was what's called sham, where the needle sort of retracts at the last minute. So the needle gives the indication that it goes in, but it doesn't really go in. It just sort of retracts at the last minute. And if that's the control, so if in fact you saw something different for that control group where the needle doesn't go in, that would be very interesting. But it also, similarly, there was no difference, right?
Yeah, and that's the essence of good science, is if you have these good placebo-controlled studies, or they call them sham-controlled, as you just alluded to. Right. And so the listeners have to understand that it's very easy to give a group of people acupuncture, ask them if they feel better, and they say, yeah, I feel better, because you're not controlling for the placebo effects.
Right.
Okay, well, if you get two groups of people, you give one group acupuncture, you give another group acupuncture, which is exactly as you've said, it feels like acupuncture, looks like it, but actually the needles are placed in the wrong place, or the needles are retracted at the last second. And in those better controlled, more high quality studies, there's no difference between the two groups,
right?
Because you're accounting for the placebo effect.
Yeah.
And when you have an N of 1, and you have one individual who's getting acupuncture and they feel better, you're not accounting for placebo. You're not accounting for the expectation and belief. So that's why controlled scientific studies are so important.
Yeah. And and not to mention, if it were ever discovered, right? Number one, I'd be the first one to bend the knee, like a good scientist should do. I'd be the first one there bending the knee, saying, "My goodness, you've proved us all wrong." And at the same time, that would be the most important discovery in the history of humankind. They get a Nobel Prize in physics and medicine.
Yeah.
For discovering the chi field and the chi meridians. That would be, Einstein, Darwin, that would be right up there with them.
I agree. And the reality is that these mechanisms have never been demonstrated empirically.
Right.
So what are we supposed to do? And people misunderstand. They think that I'm a cynic. They get the term skeptic and cynic mixed up.
Yeah.
And they think
Right.
that I am immediately just tossing out proposals and just and ignoring all of this kind of early interesting preliminary data. And the reality is I'm very open-minded.
Yeah.
And I'll always point my nose in the direction of the research if there's good evidence.
Yeah.
But extraordinary, this is a Carl Sagan quote, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
Extraordinary evidence, right? Yeah.
And the extraordinary evidence is never there.
It's never there. And if it ever manifests itself, again, I'll be the first one, and I know you would be too.
Yeah, for sure.
We'd be the first one there touting the G meridians and everything if it ever could prove it. So let's go to the concept of sports nutrition and supplements. And there's quite a number of passages in your book about those, and you could have an entire podcast on just this topic with all of the debates that we have about supplements, nutrition, and fad diets specifically, and things like that. So what are your thoughts about maybe you can give me your idea on some of the ones you find that are coming up a lot recently, but let's start with maybe fad diets. You had an entire section on all sorts of fad diets in the book. How would you unpack that for the listener?
Well, fad diets are one of the greatest scourges to modern healthcare and population health in general, because these diets by definition are not intended to help people to change their lifestyle in a long-term sustainable way. And if you look at the evidence, research is very clear on this. When people try some kind of fad diet, they always lose weight initially because they're on some kind of calorie deficit.
Right.
But if you look at 1 to 2 year follow-ups, people always regain all of the weight that they've lost. A third of people actually put on more weight than they originally lose. So you have these wonderful before and after images that you see on social media where people have lost lots of weight. What they don't show you is the after image where they've regained all of the weight that they've lost, because the fad diet is not showing them how to eat in a sustainable way. And when they inevitably fall off the wagon, which they will, because diets don't work, then they just regain all of the weight that they've lost. And actually the concept of yo-yo dieting, when there are constant weight fluctuations, you increase the weight and you lose the weight, put it back on again, that actually has the greatest risk. That's far worse for you. It leads to all sorts of psychopathologies, binge eating, depression, low quality of life. It also increases the risk of cardiovascular disease, especially in women. And it's females who are more likely to be exploited by the marketing of these so-called fad diets.
Mm-hmm.
And so the yo-yo dieting really is inconsistent with what we're seeing on the level of population health. We're spending more on fad diets now and weight loss strategies than ever.
Yeah.
Over $70 billion every single year. 45 million Americans try a diet every single year, but the rates of obesity are the highest they've ever been. They've been trending upwards since the 1970s. Something like 40% of Americans are obese. So how do we consolidate those two opposing perspectives? This idea that we're spending more on weight loss products than ever, but obesity rates are higher than ever. That's because what you're doing to lose weight clearly isn't working.
Right.
Fad diets don't work. The weight loss supplements don't work. And as you know better than anyone, the secret to weight loss and to longevity is that there is no secret.
Right. Yeah.
We've got to move more and eat better.
Right.
Now, I know that there's I'm not claiming to have just cured the obesity epidemic, because there are very complex socioeconomic genetic factors that underpin it. It's a very complex problem. But part of the problem is that people spend too much time and effort on ineffective fad diets and supplements that don't teach them how to actually change their lifestyles in a sustainable way, in an effective way.
Yeah.
So I have a bugbear about, it's one of my pet peeves.
Yeah. I'm with you. And
they're everywhere.
Yeah. And then you talked about the obesity epidemic. We're moving towards 1 in 2 people being obese
in the next 10 years. It
in
will
the
be
next
1
10
and 2.
years. 1 and 2.
And that's not just overweight. That's clinically obese.
Clinically obese, right? Yeah. And complex problem, the science of energy balance, right? A calorie is a calorie. The energy content of the food is the property most impactful.
Well, it's just that I know lots of people who have tried fad diets.
Mm-hmm.
Not all of them are overweight, but the chances are somebody who wants to lose body fat and become leaner, they've tried some kind of fad diet.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a large percentage of the population. And if only they had tried something that was proven to work, that was evidence-based, then they'd have actually had some kind of effective outcome.
Yeah.
Right. Rather than investing time and money in something that doesn't work. And so I think it's very interesting because obviously, particularly in the West, in the developed world, we are contributing to the economy by over-consuming, right? We're by eating a lot more fast food. We're eating a lot of calorie-dense foods. We're putting all this money into overconsumption, and then we turn to commercial supplements and fad diets, which are also very expensive, in order to fix the problem. So we're contributing to the economy twice over. And then you fall off the wagon, the fad diet doesn't work. And so it's just this constant ongoing cycle that is very difficult to break. Right.
And the demonization of one macronutrient, or you should completely cut out. First, it was, you need to go, Atkins was meat only. Then it was, now it's keto. And then it was, what was the one? Paleo, and now there's,
South Beach diet. I mean, it goes on and on. There are hundreds of fad diets. The juice fast diet, vegetarian, veganism is a part, is a diet in itself. I know it's more of an ideology or a lifestyle, but that is, some people go vegan because they think it's healthier.
Right.
And, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but I think the bigger picture is that people have to understand that we are wired to be seeking the one quick fix. Mm-hmm. As human beings, we are built for economy. We evolved for economy, these economy heuristics. We have these intuitions that are constantly leading us to want to take shortcuts. And we love the idea that there is a simple solution to a complex problem. And the health and wellness industry and the marketing companies that thrive within it, they understand our biases much better than we do. They know that we're looking for the one quick fix. So they market their fad diets. Okay, cut out carbs and you're going to lose weight. Cut out meat and you're going to lose weight. Cut out fats and you're going to lose weight.
Right.
Take this supplement and you'll lose weight. Eat this vegetable and you're going to lose weight. And, it goes on and on and on. Try fasting and you're going to lose weight. There are all these different quick fixes that are purported to help people to attain their goals. The one thing that people struggle to do is to invest time and effort in long-term strategies to play the long game, because people don't want to spend time and effort and to be uncomfortable and to think, oh, I'm going to lose weight, but it's going to take me 18 months of good, healthy eating and increased activity.
Yeah.
They want to think that there's a shortcut that they can take that will expedite them to their goals. But the world doesn't work like that. There are very rarely are there simple solutions to complex problems.
Yeah. And, I think, people push back about the energy balance model, right? And you can tell me if you've seen otherwise. I've not seen anything that has been able to turn that on its head, right? So the increase of body fatness is positive energy balance. The decrease of body fatness is negative energy balance. The calorie content of the food is the most important property in adiposity. And maybe someday it may be something else. I don't know. Again, I'll be the first one to come forth, and when the evidence manifests itself, I'll be the first one to agree with the new evidence. But right now, the energy balance model seems to be the most scientifically pliable understanding of the increase and decrease in adiposity.
Yeah, and there are some very rare instances where somebody's physiology or the genetics or some kind of underlying condition predispose them to to have high body mass and thyroid
Hormones,
dysfunction or
right?
leptin deficiency, so forth. But by and large, the energy balance equation is more than sufficient for most people to get their body weight to where they need or want it to be. And I think it's if you were training somebody to run a track race or to run a marathon, you wouldn't give them 6 weeks to train, certainly not from scratch. You'd say, right, if you've never run before and you want to run a marathon, let's give it a year. Well, let's give it 6 months at the very least, because it's going to take time for these adaptations. People often try to shortcut marathon training, and I've done a bunch of marathons, and you can try and shortcut it, but you're going to have a bad day. You're going to have a slow marathon. You're probably going to get injured. And people, I think, intuitively know that, okay, I can give myself 6 weeks to run a marathon, but it's probably going to go wrong.
Right.
People intuitively know that it's going to take a long time. And any worthwhile adaptation in health and fitness, it's going to take time. It's going to take time and consistency.
Yep. Okay. Let's talk about recovery protocols. You have some chapters in there in your book about recovery protocols. Now, I worked with a lot of athletes, long course athletes, marathoners, ultramarathoners, Ironmen. Things that I see often, massage or sort of robot massage. I call it robot massage, compression boots that sort of vibrate. Cold immersion, cryotherapy, compression garments, platelet-rich plasma. What are your thoughts on the recovery protocols and some of the efficacy with some of the things that you're seeing?
Well, certainly there are some recovery protocols that have better efficacy than others. But by and large, the evidence is fairly unimpressive. And again, this is not me just being a naysayer. This is me looking at the evidence and coming to some kind of conclusion. And the scientific consensus is fairly clear as well. Most of the, I guess, gimmicky types of recovery are very unimpressive. So, there's the evidence is quite contentious on ice bathing. It's very popular. I didn't realize actually how divisive it was. I tweeted a study a couple of months ago that was published in the Journal of Physiology, which is a very well-respected, esteemed journal. And it was a good study, mechanistic, and it showed that actually ice bathing can reduce the rate of muscle protein synthesis. Obviously, an important part of recovery is rebuilding structural and functional proteins that have become depleted or damaged throughout the course of a hard session. So our ability to maximize muscle protein synthesis in the recovery phase is quite important. And this study is one of several, actually, that has shown that ice bathing immediately after some kind of intense exercise or strength session actually slows the rate of muscle protein synthesis. And this study, I mean, it must have got about 5,000 shares in the end, and people commenting because they were on one side of the fence or the other. They were either happy that this study had essentially debunked a very widely used strategy, or they were sticking up for a practice that they felt had worked for them in the past, and so it had lots of engagement. But certainly, I think there's enough evidence now to suggest that ice bathing is a little bit more contentious than we thought, and actually we shouldn't just be plunging into an ice bath after exercise. There are nuances to it that have to be understood. More commercial things like cryotherapy, which have been widely adopted in professional sport, like basketball and soccer, especially NFL. The evidence for this is very, very unconvincing. It's based on the same conventional wisdom that icing sore muscles and joints was, that you reduce inflammation by making things cold. It's not actually that simple. And so whole body cryotherapy, where you essentially stand in a broom closet in which the air has been cooled to sub-zero temperatures, it's purported to have all these kind of crazy effects on the body and to restrict circulation and then enhance circulation and improve oxygenation and reduce metabolic byproducts. And again, the evidence really just doesn't support any of these claims. These are commercial claims that are not supported by the science. And it really, from what I can tell, it's really just a gimmick. And I wrote about this for Skeptical Inquirer magazine a few months ago.
Yeah, I mean, it could be some placebo effect, like we talked about.
Yeah,
but
sure.
There's also this sort of hurts so good that it hurts. It hurts a little bit, and therefore it must be doing something type of effect.
And there's also people like the theatrics of it. You know, I think people like the idea that you know, it looks interesting, it looks dramatic. You're doing something relatively extreme to the body, and as you say, that sort of lends itself to some kind of efficacy. Whether it's actually working is a different story. What kind of recovery strategies have you seen your athletes try, sort of, not under your guidance, but in terms of, you know, when they've been on their own?
Well, one of the most popular ones is massage or robot massage. Every once in a while you'll see an athlete on social media, you know, take a picture of their legs in these boots, and then, you know, the statement is usually something like recovery, or hashtag recovery. And it's so funny. I look at it, but massage, because I just find that to be robot massage. I mean, massage is one of the things that have been studied for so long, whether or not massage either A, enhances performance, or B, expedites recovery. I haven't seen any convincing meta-analysis or systematic reviews on this. What do you find?
That there's no convincing evidence that massage will expedite recovery after training. The one thing that soft tissue work can be good for is to kind of break down scar tissue in the muscle that can cause stiffness, and I think it's not been shown, but I think possibly could have a role in cramp if somebody has lots of knots and trigger points in the muscle. So and people like soft tissue for that feeling, because it helps to get rid of knots in the muscle.
Yeah.
And as you said earlier, a lot of people like to do it because it's relaxing, and there's nothing wrong with that. Go and get a even though sports massage actually is quite painful if it's done properly. It's not particularly relaxing. But
maybe there's a second order effect on reducing stress hormone. Maybe, you know.
Sure, yeah, and I absolutely buy into that. But there's but it's very popular, and it's something that's been practiced for a long time. That doesn't mean that it should be continued to be practiced. But certainly I think that's one of the more benign types of recovery. The most effective forms of recovery are an active recovery. So rather than just quitting exercise, particularly if it's a hard session, the idea would be to just do some very low intensity exercise for 10-15 minutes to prevent the blood from pooling in the periphery. So you're not just stopping exercise and allowing the blood to pool in the muscles. And some evidence showing that just some basic static stretching after a session can increase muscle permeability to help metabolites flush in and out of the muscle. And of course, the other stuff, again, this goes back to what we were saying about these long-term, playing the long game. It's about eating well and sleeping well, getting good sleep, getting good rest, because this is literally how the body recovers, is sleeping and eating. And these are the things that you have to think about and plan for and put time into. And people don't want to do that. They want to jump into some compression garments or jump in an ice bath and think that they've optimized their recovery. They don't want to put the time and the thought into it.
Yeah, exactly. It really comes down to, there's no, what I tell my athletes, there's no silver bullet. There's no shortcut. There's nothing. Time, consistency, rest, eating healthy. Right. And sometimes, the inflammation that you get after you just ran 20 miles or, something like that, you sort of want the inflammation because you want your body to respond and build itself back stronger after you rest. So why would you want to sort of stop the inflammation in an ice bath? I want that so that my body can recognize the damage that I just did to it, sleep, eat, build itself back stronger. I want that. That's the cycle of training: stress, overload, recovery, and adaptation. Stress, overload, recovery, adaptation, and you continue that circle.
It's the essence of overload, and I think it's the case of inflammation is just a normal response to training. Obviously, you don't want too much inflammation, you don't want too much muscle damage, but you're going to get that, you're going to stress the system, and you're going to get an acute decrease in performance. That's the essence of kind of a progressive overload. And things like ice bathing, that there's evidence showing that if you have an ice bath after an endurance type session, it can augment the endurance adaptation via cell signaling pathways like stimulating AMP kinase. But other researchers would suggest that AMP kinase doesn't really have an effect on endurance adaptation at all. And if it does, well, you're going out and you're running for 2, 3, 4 hours anyway. You're already stimulating that adaptation.
Right.
So, and what kind of magnitude of an effect are we looking at? If there is an effect, it's going to be very, very minor. I think one thing that's worth considering is something like compression garments. Mm-hmm. There's usually a kernel of truth to the claims, but because there is very lax regulations in the health and wellness marketing, they can make a lot of unsubstantiated claims. They can look at that kernel of truth and then just extrapolate wildly. So they can make the basic claims like, it can help to reduce markers of muscle damage after exercise, which it potentially could do. And then they make all sorts of ridiculous additional claims which are not supported by the literature. If you finish a hard race and then you're going to get on a train and you're going to sit there and not move for 3, 4, 5 hours, then some good compression tights are better than nothing, because it's that graduated compression can help facilitate blood flow. But having said that, if you get up every 30 minutes and have a walk around, that's also going to facilitate blood flow.
Right. Yeah.
So it's context is very important.
Yeah. And then the compression garments, and sometimes you see things that just look like socks that are marketed as compression garments, and so there's that too, right? So
and a lot of the manufacturers of compression socks, when you look on their websites or if you contact them yourself, they would direct you to literature on whole body compression, and they'll say, look, compression helps to facilitate recovery.
Right.
Yeah, but this study looked at whole body compression for a number of hours after a certain exercise type, and you're selling me an anklet that provides 1/20th of the amount of pressure. It's not the same thing.
Yeah. Okay, let's finish up. You've been very generous with your time. So you had this whole section in your book about logical fallacies, right? And I love that section because it gets into all of the biases and cognitive biases that we make. So, for instance, what we talked about, acupuncture and qi and such, the appeal to antiquity, right? Which you hear people say all the time, oh, it's ancient, but it's ancient. It's like, okay, yeah, so what? Astrology is ancient. And we know that's nonsense. You have a whole section on some of these logical fallacies. So I made a list of a handful of the ones that I get a lot, and I wanted to get your sort of quick response about these. So one of the ones that I get is, look, Tony, you're always talking about science. Science is right one day and wrong the next. One day you pick up a paper and coffee's good for you, and then the next day you pick up a paper, coffee's bad for you. How can you trust it?
Yeah, and that's a very tricky one, and I would always try and turn that on its head by saying, look, any authority that claims to have all the answers and claims to have answers that cannot be challenged and that don't change, that's the kind of authority that you need to be wary of, because even expert authorities have to prove their contentions. The strength of science is that it changes, is that it's malleable, and that we base our decisions on the latest data. Now, unfortunately, the way that science is reported in the mainstream media, they are businesses at the end of the day, so they're going to report sensationalist headlines to get likes and clicks and shares. So if there is, a small scale study that shows that, whatever, eating apples is going to help improve your performance, you can bet, even if it's not a particularly strong study, it's going to be splashed all over the front page, right? Because it's sensationalist, it's going to get the clicks. It's not necessarily representative of real science. So yes, science is constantly changing and constantly evolving, but that's the strength of science. And sometimes, we can't say with any confidence one way or another. Sometimes we have to sit on the fence. As good scientists, we have to say, you know what? actually there's not enough data to make to give a decisive answer on that, and that's got to be okay. Unfortunately, as humans, we like answers to things. We need answers. We need answers so badly that often we will make up our answers, and that doesn't help anyone.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of science. That it's like your car the GPS recalculates when it gets new information. And
right, exactly.
That's just like with science. Yes, there will be on the frontier circumstances that will be wrong because we got new information, better information, better science.
Yeah. Well, there was a time, that we looked up at the sky and saw this lightning coming down, and we were convinced it was the wrath of Zeus, and over time, right. So, and the twinkling things up in the sky were celestial bodies, and over time, science has kind of conquered these mysteries and has provided a scientific explanation, and in time it will do that with all of the remaining mysteries, but we have to give it time, and in the meantime it doesn't help us to make up the answers to the mysteries, and just because we need to have answers. Big
pharma is deliberately hiding the real facts, and they're putting out deliberately fraudulent information. How do we retort?
Well, it's a very difficult one, because if somebody really believes that, if they believe it in their heart and soul, then there's not an awful lot you can do to convince them otherwise. You can give them corrective information, and you can give them facts and evidence, be very nice and respectful, but ultimately it's very difficult to combat conspiracy theories. All that you can do is ask the individual, okay, well, look, what would it take to undermine your belief that there is some kind of big pharma conspiracy? What would it take to get you to question your beliefs? And sometimes they'll say, nothing. That's what I believe, and no amount of evidence that you can present will ever change my mind, in which case probably wasting your time arguing with them. But this is the essence of conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
And all we can do is just to get people, we can't change people's minds for them. We can just carefully encourage them to change their own minds, and just to look objectively at the facts and data. And that's why we need to be teaching critical thinking in schools, so that people can see very clearly when they're falling into conspiracy theory.
Yeah. Yep. And with that one, I know 100% that X worked for me. I know what your science says, but my friend Sam Snead took this and it 100% worked for him. And I know it 100% worked for me. Sort of the personal experience argument.
Yeah, this is the anecdote. Anecdotes are very powerful because it's something that we can identify with. It's a personal experience, and it's kind of what we call an emotive argument, I guess, because as I said, it's accessible, whereas science is not always accessible. It's been done by people in white coats in labs and big studies and things like that. It's easy to become disconnected.
Yeah,
but it comes back to this idea that we're all just products of our conditioning, and we're going to believe things that are not necessarily true based on our experiences, but our own personal experiences are not necessarily going to reflect the objective nature of reality.
Yeah.
So that's why we need to try and control for our biases.
Right.
And
we've seen this.
That's what science does.
Yeah, and we've seen this with the vaccinations. We've had we've had something like 13 billion doses now. 13 billion. Yeah. Yet there are still the vaccine hesitancy community, or the anti-vax community that just, well, I know someone who got an adverse reaction to the vaccine, and somehow in their mind they think that that's worse than COVID-19.
Right. And this is a very complex subject, and this could be an entire another podcast. Right. But there's a couple of important takeaways from that. Number one, people's risk assessment is skewed. I saw a guy cycling down the main road in downtown Los Angeles the other day, and it was getting dark. He had no lights. He had no protective equipment. He had no helmet. He had over-ear headphones on. He was wearing all black, and yet he had a face mask on. Right. So
right. Yeah.
So what are the chances that you're going to catch COVID cycling down a busy street when you're not coming into contact with anyone else? chances of you getting knocked off your bike are far greater.
Yeah, yeah.
So people have skewed risk assessment. So of course, masks work, and masks are important. Ideally, we should be wearing masks, and particularly if you're at risk of severe illness, or you're into contact with somebody who has risk of severe illness. But it comes back to kind of science denial and data denial, that the evidence for vaccine efficacy is there. It's very clear. And if you ask the experts, the scientists, the medics who understand how to read data, they'll tell you very clearly vaccines work. Part of the problem, and I wrote about this recently, is that correcting people's misunderstandings of public health policy and public health issues it's not easy, but it's possible. You can give somebody corrective information, and you can correct their misinformed beliefs about healthcare. It's much harder to correct people's misinformed beliefs about ideological matters like religion and politics.
Right.
And this is why it's so harmful that vaccines and COVID treatments have been politicized, because something that would have been relatively, I want to say straightforward, but it would have been much more possible to fix, this problem of vaccine hesitancy, has now become intertwined with political ideology, and that makes it 10 times harder to tackle. So it all comes back to this this kind of core theme of doing whatever you can to understand your biases, forget what everyone else is doing, have a look at yourself. What biases are you prone to making, and how can you mitigate them? And that's kind of the essence of, I guess, what we call cognitive debiasing, being a good critical thinker.
Right. Yeah. Let's see. I also have it's ancient wisdom. We talked about the appeal to antiquity. Hey, look, what's the harm in integrating the quote unquote best of both worlds? We talked about, the potential where this can go wrong, right? If someone starts to forego real life-saving treatment because of ancient wisdom, then that is where it can go wrong.
And this is a very popular one, the appeal to traditional, the appeal to antiquity. And we see it a lot in healthcare and a lot in performance sport, paleo diet, barefoot running shoes as well.
Right. Yeah.
And run like your Paleolithic ancestors.
Right.
And, it's pervasive, and it's very attractive, because it kind of harks back to this time when athletes were pure and we didn't have modern technology, brainwashing us. But actually all interventions need to be judged on merit. This idea that we should all be running barefoot because that's how our ancestors did it. Well, our ancestors did lots of things that we no longer do.
Right.
They also, they all died at 30 years old, and when they ate animals, this is kind of in line with paleo diet, they also ate the bones and the cartilage and the ligaments and tendons. Right. We don't see modern paleo practitioners doing that. So, kind of cherry picking here.
Yeah.
But if you're going to apply an intervention, it should be because the intervention works, not because it correlates with some ancient practice. Ancient Chinese medicine, it is associated with mysticism and wisdom. Actually, I don't care about any of that. I care whether it works. Can cupping actually cure muscle soreness?
Right.
Can Reiki actually heal somebody's back pain? Can acupuncture actually cure somebody's headache? The data, our best source of determining the true nature of reality, which is the scientific process, says no. So that's kind of, if that's the best tool we have, then that's kind of that. There's your answer. I'm not gonna try something just because it correlates with a past practice. That's not a reason to try something. That's the absence of a reason.
Right. I think you're right. And look, write your paper. I told me, write your paper. If you think that you can, with your elderberry, cure something, write your paper. Yeah. I'll be the first. Again, I'll be the first one to bend the knee when the cure for some disease with elderberry comes forth. But until now, it's just another extraordinary claim.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming on to the podcast. And any final words you want to end with?
I think, just to reiterate what I said at the start, is that I consider myself to be a skeptic, not a cynic. And we've all got to remain open-minded to new possibilities and new treatments and new ways to improve performance. But as somebody who is trained to interpret data and who has spent a lot of time trying to understand human bias and the ways that we are able to fool ourselves, my kind of impression is that most of these interventions, I think we've just got to be very skeptical. Always ask for the evidence. Always ask for some kind of proof that this thing actually works objectively.
Right.
And as to quote Richard Feynman, is keep an open mind, but not so open that your brains fall out.
Right. Yeah, exactly. All right. And the book is The Skeptic's Guide to Sports Science, Confronting Myths of the Health and Fitness Industry. You guys that know me, you guys are going to get a stocking stuffer. But did you make an audiobook yet? You're going to get this on audiobook?
Unfortunately not, because I'd have to record it myself. And it's very time consuming. And I'm not sure that people could listen to my dulcet tones for a 12-hour book. But potentially, I haven't ruled it out yet. But it's available paperback, hardback, Kindle. And you can find out more about the work that I'm doing in exercise, health, skepticism on my website. If you just go to nbtiller.com and follow me on Twitter at nbtiller. All of the themes that we've discussed today, this is kind of the content that you can expect if you reach out to me.
Excellent. I'll put the link to the book in the show notes and the link to Dr. Tiller's Twitter in the show notes as well. Go and follow him and get this book. If my wishes come true, you'll sell 1 million copies of this book.
Well, I appreciate from your mouth to somebody's ears. Thanks so much, Tony. That was
Thanks
great.
again. Yeah. Thanks again to Professor Nick Tiller. Follow him on Twitter at nbtiller. Go check out his website, nbtiller.com, and pick up The Skeptic's Guide to Sports Science, Confronting Myths of the Health and Fitness Industry. The link is in the show notes. I'm always amazed at how time just seemingly melts away on these podcasts when we're having conversations with experts like Dr. Tiller. Every single one of those conversation points could have been its own podcast. So hopefully at some point in time in the future, we'll get them back on and have some more in-depth conversations. Just a brief afterword before I finish up and let you go. I hope this podcast, and certainly Professor Tiller's book, will give you some ammunition and a tool set for figuring out what actually works and what doesn't. That toolkit is called science, or the scientific method. You've heard me say on this podcast before that the gold standard of science is double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled trials. We don't always have the gold standard, and sometimes we don't have enough science to give a conclusive answer, in which case you may wish to withhold judgment. But sometimes in the teeth of the gold standard of science, you will find some people who will proceed down each point in the science denial playbook. Recall my conversation with Dr. Tiller. That playbook is, hey, look, science is right one day, wrong the next. Or, but what about nefarious actors hiding the real facts and making the data seem like it's conclusive? The argument from personal experience. Oh, I personally experienced X, or I know someone personally who experienced X. Obviously, the mistake here is N equals 1. You are an N of 1. Or, but it's ancient wisdom. Therefore, ancient wisdom must be valid. Or XYZ treatment is quote-unquote natural. Therefore, what's the harm? It's better. Or we should integrate the best of both worlds, and so on. I actually had an experience recently where I sat down in front of someone who hit literally all 5 of those points of what I call the science denial playbook, probably in the same order. It can be extremely frustrating, to say the least. But if you ever encounter someone who hits these points, usually there's something else going on. And look no further than Professor Tiller's section on heuristics and biases in his book. What it means is the person has not been able to appropriately determine the difference between what is true and what one wants to be true. What's true and what one wants to be true are 2 entirely different things. The best science available is the tool that humanity has devised to make sure that our hunter-gatherer brains that evolved in middle world to forage for food and throw rocks is not fooled, given its high susceptibility to biases and false patterns. And that reminds me of a quote by Carl Sagan, and I'll end with this quote. He would remark, "Science works. It is not perfect. It can be misused. It is only a tool, but it is by far the best tool we have. Self-correcting, ongoing, applicable to everything. It has 2 rules. First, there are no sacred truths. All assumptions must be critically examined. Arguments from authority are worthless. Second, whatever is inconsistent with the facts must be discarded or revised. We must understand the cosmos as it is and not confuse how it is with how we wish it to be. The obvious is sometimes false. The unexpected is sometimes true." Stay safe, and we'll talk to you next time on the Endurance Experience Podcast.
Follow Event Horizon Endurance Sport on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter for training programs and services. To become a member of our Endurance Institute or for a complete archive of podcasts, log on to our website, eventhorizon.com.